and for everything.
I love you too. You got
I read the news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
CPAC, the annual gathering of conservatives, though the meaning of that word seems to change every year. Anyway, CPAC is underway now in a suburb of D.C. I was going to use today's What's News to talk about day one in Steve Bannon's shocking almost disclosure.
Bannon really seemed to genuinely to pretend to like Priebus.
His job is by far one of the toughest jobs I've ever seen in my life. To make it run every day, to make the trains, and you only see the surface.
Oh, so close to saying make the trains run on time. You see that? That was smooth. He pulled out of that. He caught himself before he went full Mussolini there. Now, Bannon just has to resist talking about his comp.
Thanks, Stephen. But I've got to get to dump at CPAC.
Donald Trump last night said transgender students can't use the bathrooms they want to use. Now, he's going to check what they got down there or something. I'm not sure. But we should have seen this coming, because if there's one thing Trump is famous for, it's telling people where to pee.
Well, that's true, Stephen. But again, we have his CPAC speech.
According to the administration, this wasn't about persecuting any group. It was strictly a legal concern.
The president has maintained for a long time that this is a states' rights issue.
Oh, grow a pair. Is there a more cowardly phrase than this is a states' rights issue? This was controversial even within the administration. Education Secretary Betsy DeVos initially resisted signing off on it because of the potential harm that rescinding the protections could cause transgender students. But Attorney General Jeff Sessions, who has opposed expanding transgender rights, pushed DeVos to relent. Oh, come on, Betsy. They won't let me discriminate against black people. Just give me this one. I need something. Ultimately, Donald Trump sided with Sessions, and when DeVos was faced with the alternative of resigning, she agreed to go along. So Betsy DeVos knew it would harm children and did it anyway to save her job. How does she sleep at night? I'll let the states decide.
All right. Well, I guess we're going there. This is unconscionable. But Dump is defaulting to that GOP standard of states' rights, right? So that means he's going to be hands off on other issues the states have already decided.
There's a big difference between that and recreational marijuana. And I think that when you see something like the opioid addiction crisis, the last thing that we should be doing is encouraging people. There is still a federal law that we need to abide by when it comes to recreational marijuana and other drugs of that nature. So I think there's a big difference between medical marijuana, which states have the states where it's allowed have set forth a process to administer and regulate that usage versus recreational marijuana. That's a very, very different subject.
So is the federal government then going to take some sort of action around this recreational marijuana in some of these states?
Well, I think that's a question for the Department of Justice. I do believe that you'll see greater enforcement of it.
All right. Well, now can we get to Dump at CPAC, please? He's already blowharding.
I'm against the people that make up stories and make up sources.
Your original source for fake news. Fox News. We make shit up.
They shouldn't be allowed to use sources unless they use somebody's name. Let their name be put out there. A source says that Donald Trump is a horrible, horrible human being. Let him say it to my face.
I'll say it to your face. Donald Trump is proving more and more with each passing day to be a horrible, horrible human being. Got that? All right, what else is he going on about?
And I love the First Amendment. Nobody loves it better than me.
Of course you do.
So we're all part of this very historic movement, a movement the likes of which, actually, the world has never seen before.
Speaking of big movements, I did just spend a week in Mexico, just saying.
Basically, all I've done is keep my promise.
Yeah, what about this promise?
I am going to protect and save your Social Security and your Medicare. You made a deal a long time ago.
Okay, you didn't say that at CPAC, but now your people are contradicting you on that. Come on, Donnie, you've said you're keeping your promises. But I digress. Dump went on and on about how our military is depleted. The military, which even after all the sequester cuts still costs more than the next 7 nations combined.
And we will be substantially upgrading all of our military, bigger and better and stronger. stronger than ever before, and hopefully we'll never have to use it, but nobody's going to mess with us, folks. Nobody. It will be one of the greatest military buildups in American history. No one will dare question, as they have been, because we're very depleted. Sequester. Sequester.
What did you say?
Sequester. Sequester.
Sequester? Is that like this?
And you heard the Prime Minister, you heard Netanyahu yesterday.
Netanyahu? I thought it was Netanyahu. Oh, is that like this?
The president said today that the deportations taking place under his watch are a military operation. Right. Secretary Kelly said the military won't be involved in deportations. Did the president misspeak?
The president was using that as an adjective. It's happening with precision.
Are you saying that's a euphemism?
A euphemism.
No, and it's not a euphemism either. Oh boy, we got a lot of work to do. Have you found an event or a march or a protest or a meeting to go to this weekend? It's all hands on deck time. So check out resistancecalendar.org, resistancerecess.com, or the Indivisible Guide. Come on, we liberal activists gotta get active.
I got good news.
And that's today's dose of Nicole Sandler's What's News. Hear Nicole's show Tuesday through Friday from 3 to 4 Eastern at NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
Mary had a little man. The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon.
I have a dream today.
Change has come to America.
Okay.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show.
Turn up your mind.
It's Friday, you bastards.
You know, girls, it's great to live in a democracy today.
Yeah.
Where freedom is everywhere.
Where?
But girls, we often take this freedom for granted. Freedom of speech.
Oh.
Freedom of thought.
What?
And freedom of action.
Do something.
But you know, gals.
What?
Just because a bunch of men signed that Declaration of Independence in 1776 doesn't mean that freedom was for men alone.
No.
Oh, no, you take Tom Jefferson.
Okay.
Ben Franklin.
You know.
John Hancock. There's a hell of a guy for you right there.
He's adorable.
All these men had wives.
Yes.
They probably had a few broads on the side, too.
Grab them.
These women wanted freedom just as much as their men did.
Yes.
But gals, I wonder, do we? I think it's time that we women thought about it a bit. Hell, I think it's time we did something about it.
Hell.
So come on, fellow females of the 20th century.
21st.
Be glad that you're an American.
I'm glad.
Proclaim your freedom.
Freedom.
And detention.
Oh, dear God.
Pledge allegiance.
Allegiance.
And bounce your boobies. Get into the swing. Bounce your boobies. The swing is everything.
Everything.
Makes no difference if they're big or small.
Just two.
As long as you give him your all.
Oh.
Bounce your boobies. Come on, honey. Bounce them up and down. Bounce your boobies. Come on, bounce your boobies, honey. Come on. Loosen the bra that binds you.
Oh.
Take it off if you feel like it.
Look out below.
Bounce your boobies.
Oh.
There we go. Doesn't that feel good?
No.
Bounce your boobies. You know, girls.
What?
Men aren't the only people in the world today who have something to give.
Are you sure?
But it sure looks like it sometimes.
It does.
Just look around you.
Okay.
Men stick out all over the place.
Really?
Big fat cigars.
Yeah.
Big fat stomachs.
Yeah.
And just where they should stick out.
Oh my God, that's a Harley.
Where is it?
Hello?
Yes, girls, we know it. We've got it. We know what they're worth.
Priceless,
So
Johan.
come on, gals.
Let's get into the swing of things. Give your boobies some freedom. All together now.
Bounce your boobies.
Let 'em rock and roll. Nudge your knockers.
Keep them hot and sold.
I don't know.
Just admit it, gals. It sure feels great.
Ba-dum.
To feel them swinging. Ooh, titillate.
Ooh.
Bounce your boobies. Come on, bounce.
Come on.
Bounce your boobies. There, look at that gal. She's going.
Look at that.
Bounce your boobies. Oh, doesn't that feel good? Bounce.
Ow.
Bounce.
Ow.
Bounce.
Ow.
Bounce.
Ow. Your boobies now. Hey, 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 hey. Everybody. Oh.
God. There's so much. It's freaking Friday. It's not even over yet. And they usually do the Shabbat news, the Shabbos. Right around sunset, I guess that's when Jared, goes and, begins to light the candles and daven around and, around Ivanka, I guess. And they stop advising the president of the United States. And that's when all this crap hits the fan. So I'm still waiting for this travel ban that we were supposed to have on Wednesday. We didn't get it on Wednesday. We didn't get it on Thursday. Today's Friday. They like to dump things. I swear to God, if you're traveling internationally, be forewarned. If the president comes out with a new travel ban, it's just going to mung it all up. Just the whole thing's going to be a mess. So I don't know. I'll keep my eyes and ears out looking for that. But I have to tell you, this CPAC thing, it never disappoints. It's like the circus for the political action committees. It was sponsored this year by Breitbart and the NRA. So, a year ago, Trump was shunned. He was shunned at CPAC. And now he owns the place. And it's kind of like the same story with the whole country now. Oh, it's just, it's really creepy. The Washington Post, they just covered Trump's speech this morning at the CPAC. They called it wide-ranging, which means scatological, which means, oh my God, what is he talking about? This was a rambling, angry, and only marginally coherent speech. I want to play you what happened 8 minutes into the speech. Just 8 minutes in. First of all, he thanked them, said he loves CPAC. They were all friends. These are conservatives. They don't particularly love Donald Trump. They don't like, isolationism. Remember, conservatives are for free trade. They're for globalist trade. They're for, selling across the universe. These are not people that were anti-TPP. These were not people that are anti-NAFTA. These are the people that wanted these trade deals. These are people that want to knock down barriers and trade across the world. Okay, they haven't seen a tax plan from him, which is what they want to see. They haven't seen the repeal of Obamacare, which is what they want to see. And as far as security goes, all they know is the first travel ban that was rolled out was an absolute disaster. It was a mess. It caused chaos. It was rejected by a court that had upon it 2 Republican appointees and 1 Democratic judge, appointed by a Democratic president. And they just think it was a disaster, and they haven't heard the plan to keep us safe from ISIS. Now Trump says he's not going to come up with a plan to keep us safe from ISIS. He's going to let the generals do it, and then he'll go along with, pretty much whatever they say. It's been 35 days. He said first 30 he'd have this plan. Also, he hasn't got a plan to repeal Obamacare and replace it. Now, the conservatives have a plan to repeal Obamacare. They've done it for 6 years. They just don't have a replacement. And these town halls are having an impact upon conservative members of Congress. So good for us. Good for us. But so after he said, the CPAC, you finally got a president, it was golf applause, man. It was like, tell us more, please, because we're not down with your agenda. Okay, we're not. We like the deportation. We hate black and brown people. On this we can agree, but the rest of your, it wasn't really our thing. What you're saying, you know what I mean? So tell us what you're going to do. Well, he realized. I mean, he senses the crowd, and he realized that this speech was going nowhere. So 8 minutes into it, he downshifted into, "Hey, but don't we all hate the media?" Now, after I play you this, I'm going to tell you what just happened.
The media didn't think
told you, it's
we would win. The pundits, you're right, they had an idea. The pundits didn't think we'd win. The consultants that suck up all that money, they suck it up. They're so good.
Like Kellyanne Conway?
They're not good at politics, but they're really good at sucking up people's money.
Like Manafort? Like Lewandowski?
Especially my opponents, because I kept them down to a minimum.
Your consultants.
But the consultants didn't think we would win.
You didn't think you'd win.
But they all underestimated the power of the people, And the people proved them totally wrong.
You people.
And this is so true. And this is what's been happening.
What?
Never underestimate the people.
Exactly. Never.
I don't think it'll ever happen again.
Again.
And I want you all to know that we are fighting the fake news. It's fake, phony, fake. A few days ago, I called the fake news the enemy of the people, and they are. They are the enemy of the people.
How messed up is this?
Because they have no sources. They just make them up when there are none. I saw one story recently where they said 9 people have confirmed. There are no 9 people.
There are 9
I don't believe
people.
there was 1 or 2 people. 9 people.
Oh, my God.
And I said, give me a break, because I know the people. I know who they talk to.
You
there were
know
no 9
nothing.
people, but they say 9 people. And somebody reads it, and they think, oh, 9 people, they have 9 sources. They make up sources. They're very dishonest people. In fact, in covering my comments, the dishonest media did not explain that I called the fake news the enemy of the people, the fake news.
Wow, right? Let me tell you something. Generals are speaking out now. They're saying that this is the scariest thing that they've ever heard, that a president to stand there and say that you should not believe anything you read, you should only believe what he says, is dangerous. Here, listen, this is William McRaven. He's a 4-star admiral and a former Navy SEAL, okay?
February 17th, the president said, the news media is the enemy of the American people. The news media is the enemy of the American people. This sentiment may be the greatest threat to democracy in my lifetime. This sentiment. And I will tell you as journalism majors, as Americans, you should challenge that sentiment and that statement every opportunity you can.
General McRaven, 4-star admiral, former Navy SEAL, telling a group at the University of Texas at Austin at the College of Communication, telling them as journalism students, you need to get out of here and go and challenge this president on this falsehood that the New York Times, the CNN, the Washington Post, the Daily Mail, the BBC, the LA Times, the New York Daily News, all these reporters out there, all these serious journalists, PolitiFact, all of these efforts to debunk this president and show him to be the most amazing liar that has ever been sworn in as president of the United States. And we've had some world heavyweight champion liars. I mean, we went to war based on a lie. That's a pretty big lie. But when you have the generals, when you have Navy SEALs, when you have the FBI, when you have people from the CIA, Ted Price this week resigning because they cannot serve under a lying sack of crap like this president, and they feel that he's endangering the country. Others think he's an autocrat. Some can't serve because he won't let them have their deputies, come and serve under them because they disagree with the president's agenda of slamming the media, of slamming news, of calling real news fake and fake news real, like Breitbart, okay? Like Alex Jones. That is not real. It might be entertaining to you. You might enjoy it, but it's not real. That is a drunk guy who is just 3 sheets to the wind, claiming that he talks to people inside the intelligence community, and they're telling him that Hillary Clinton smells like sulfur and that Barack Obama is possessed by demons. Okay, that's sick. That's just sick, twisted crap. That's fake. However, I got to tell you what happened today, okay? After he did this thing at CPAC, and I got to tell you, this speech of his went on and on and on about the media, on.
They dropped off the word fake. And all of a sudden, the story became the media is the enemy. They take the word fake out. And now I'm saying, oh, no, this is no good. But that's the way they are. So I'm not against the media. I'm not against the press. I don't mind bad stories if I deserve them. And I tell you, I love good stories, but we won't go.
Okay, it just goes on and on like this about the media. Then he said something about, well, he tells me, unnamed sources, name your sources, say it to my face. Then he starts telling a story about, you can't go to Paris anymore. A friend of his who he won't name. He won't name.
I don't get too many of them. But I am only against the fake news media or press. Fake. They have to leave that
Breitbart,
word.
Alex Jones.
I'm against the people
Fox.
that make up stories and make up sources. They shouldn't be allowed to use sources unless they use somebody's name. Let their name be put out there. Let their name be put out.
So you want covert operators to put their names out there so that they can, endanger every contact they've ever had? Are you stupid? Can you not think this through? This is like, people give they tell you they're going to war. They tell you. Do you know why we announced that we're going to do some sort of an invasion? You know why shock and awe was, told to the Iraqi people so they could get out of the way. So you don't have civilian casualties. So you don't have mothers and children in the way of the bombs. Okay? That's why we say we're going into Mosul. This man is a moron. He has absolutely no clue what he's doing. And that's why he only talks about media.
A source says that Donald Trump is a horrible, horrible human being. Let him say it to my face. Let there be no more sources. And remember this, and not all in all cases. I mean, I had a story written yesterday about me in Reuters by a very honorable man. It was a very fair story. There are some great reporters around. They're talented, they're honest as the day is long. They're great. But there are some terrible, dishonest people. And they do a tremendous disservice to our country and to our people, a tremendous disservice. They are very dishonest people, and they shouldn't use sources. They should put the name of the person. You will see stories dry up like you've never seen before. So you have no idea how bad it is, because if you are not part of the story, and I put myself in your position sometimes, because many of you, you're not part of the story.
Many of
and
you.
if you're not part of the story, then you sort of know. If you are part of the story, you know what they're saying is true or not. So when they make it up, and they make up something else, and you saw that before the election, polls. The polls. They come out with these polls, and everybody was so surprised. Actually, a couple of polls got it right. I must say.
I can't take it. Okay, I'm trying to wait until he gets to the part where he says somebody told him something, but we don't want to name their name. We don't want to say that. I mean, it's just an amazing thing. Okay, so let me tell you what happened today before we go to the break, and then you can decide whether or not this is the beginning of the end of freedom of the press in this country, or if it's the middle of the end of freedom of the press in this country. Today, Sean Spicer, Spicy, or Melissa McCarthy, however you know him, was to give the White House press briefing. Of course, they do it every day. And today they didn't do it in public. Today, they said there was be no meeting in the James Brady press briefing room. Instead, the press briefing would be inside the West Wing offices. And they invited a handful of reporters to attend, and specifically prohibited reporters from attending. The reporters who were invited and allowed to attend at Spicer's office were Breitbart, the Washington Times, which is owned by the Reverend Sung Myung Moon and the Moonies, and the OneAmericaNewsNetwork.net. That fake news that is so easily debunked. I do it all weekend long on my Facebook page with people that send me crap from there. And guess who was not allowed to come to the press briefing today? The New York Times was turned away. The Hill, the newspaper of Capitol Hill, was turned away. The BBC was told not to attend. The Los Angeles Times was told not to attend. Politico was not allowed to attend, and other news organizations it's a long, long list who were not allowed to attend. The White House Correspondents Association that holds that great dinner every year. I've been to the Correspondents' Dinner. I haven't been to the Gridiron, which is the big one. They are criticizing this decision. They are very upset. They are protesting strongly. The WHCA board is protesting strongly against how today's gaggle is being handled by the White House. The association's president said in a statement, "We encourage the organizations that were allowed in to share the material with others in the press corps who were not. The board will be discussing this further with White House staff. So far, the White House has not responded. They are inviting in fake news, and they are keeping out serious journalists. Why? Because today and yesterday and the day before, the New York Times, the Chicago Tribune, others, CNN, have all reported that that Reince Priebus, as a result of the Sunday shows, he was on. I'll play you the clip just to refresh your memory. When he was asked about Russia, he said the New York Times was a fake story. This is what Donald Trump's talking about. The 9 unnamed sources was the New York Times story. And it was a fake story, and he was given permission by the intelligence community. Reince said he was. And that he was given permission to tell you, Chuck Todd and Fox News Sunday, Chris Wallace, he was given permission to tell you that the intelligence community and the Justice Department think that the New York Times story was false and fake. He said he talked to them, and they gave him permission. It's wrong on so many levels. It's illegal. If that happened, it's breaking all the rules at the Justice Department, which is Jeff Sessions. Hard to do now, right? But I'm going to play you all of it, okay? And then we'll take you right through.
For a commercial-free, on-demand, whenever, wherever listening experience, visit randyrhodes.com for your personal premium podcast today.
Now that Trump's moved into the White House, I know. You could see he wasted no time. He went to work for his ultra-wealthy pals. He's making fundamental economic changes that are going to affect your money and your retirement. He's chipping away at banking regulations. He's going after Dodd-Frank, and that unwinds the fiduciary rule. That's a rule that keeps your money safe from deceptive financial practices. Like I said before, this administration is so awful. They are so greedy. And that's why now, more than ever, is the best time to diversify your retirement portfolio like I did. Gold's low correlation with stocks and bonds can help you in times of uncertainty. Call my friends at ITM Trading. Get a free gold kit. Learn why gold survives every government, every currency, every economic crisis. Call ITM today at 1-888-OWN-GOLD for guidance from their precious metals experts. They've helped thousands of people just like me buy gold and silver coins and bars, and they can help you too. 1-888-OWN-GOLD. Call 1-888-OWN-GOLD.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1908. That was the day the United States Supreme Court decided the case Mueller versus Oregon. It was a landmark decision in the realm of protective labor legislation. It restricted the workday to 10 hours for women. Laundry owner Kurt Mueller required his female employees to work more than 10 hours a day against Oregon's labor law. The Supreme Court upheld his conviction and fine. Protective labor legislation was a product of the reform social movements of the progressive era. Reformers like Jane Addams worked to protect women from the industrial dangers that bred physical and moral harm to women. The decision drove a class-based wedge within the women's movement that lasted for much of the 20th century. Working-class women generally supported protective labor legislation like Mueller, but equal rights advocates like Alice Paul opposed it. They argued that protective legislation like Mueller rested on stereotypes regarding the differences between men and women. These differences often fueled anti-women discrimination, state control, and financial dependency. As well, critics remarked the ruling set a precedent for women's biology as childbearers as a basis for separate legislation. Only later would working-class critics note that the ruling did not cover domestics, agricultural workers, or white-collar workers. The 1938 Fair Labor Standards Act would supplant some parts of Mueller with its guarantees for workers of both sexes. Many working-class women would later welcome the passage of Title VII of the Civil Rights Act in 1965, which prohibited employment discrimination. Some would concede the many flaws of protective labor legislation that held women back. But women's rights advocates would continue to debate protective legislation and the Equal Rights Amendment well into the 1970s.
We did it, you bastards! We're live! And it only took 2 years!
Okay. All right. So we're back, we're live, and you're there, and we're here, and ain't that great? Now let me just tell you that if you want to listen whenever and wherever you'd like to listen, Just go to randyrhodes.com, click on podcasts and swag, and get your podcast commercial-free, on demand, on any device. randyrhodes.com. Open all day, every day.
Clear for takeoff. The Randi Rhodes Air Force. Air Force. RandyRhodes.com.
All right, let's go back to last Sunday, okay? Reince Priebus was all over the Sunday shows. He was on MSNBC. He was on Meet the Press. He was on Fox News Sunday with Chris Wallace. He was all over the place. He had one story to tell, and this was it.
The president never seemed to answer the question that was asked 3 or 4 times there, which is, does he know for sure that anybody on his campaign, can he say definitively that nobody in his campaign, nobody that he's been associated with, had any contacts with any Russian agents?
No, first of all, the answer is no, and we don't know of any contacts with Russian agents, and that gets to that New York Times story, Chuck. I mean, we've spent days talking about a story that says that our campaign had constant contacts with Russian spies, and I can tell you, I've talked to the top levels of the intelligence community, and they've assured me that New York Times story was grossly overstated and inaccurate and totally wrong. I know what the intelligence committees in the House and the Senate were told by the FBI, and I know what I was told, and what I will tell you is that story was total baloney. And in fact, Devin Nunes, who's the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, went on the record after he was informed by the FBI as to that story. And what did he say? He said it was total garbage. This is what we're talking about, Chuck. It's not all media. It's not everyone involved in the media. It is this sort of fake news stuff that is enormously important. That when you get a front page story of the New York Times without a single source on the record saying that your campaign had constant contacts. They didn't say one contact. They didn't say 2 contacts. It doesn't matter. We have not been informed of even that. But to say constant contact, then the next day, Chuck, the Wall Street Journal comes out and says that the President of the United States is being cut out of information by the intelligence community. Then later in the day, all of the main departments of the intelligence community says, that's not true. This is what we're dealing with.
Okay, that was one show where he said that he's talked to the intelligence community, and the intelligence community tells him this is all fake news, okay?
You say that the intelligence community says that there were no contacts between anyone in the Trump campaign, any associate of Mr. Trump, and anybody involved as a Russian agent as to the campaign and collusion in the campaign with Russia. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, they told me, absolutely. They have made it very clear that story in the New York Times is complete garbage. And quite frankly, they used different words than that, okay?
Who was it that said that?
And when I read that,
who was it that
I'm not going to tell you.
Well, wait a minute.
Tell you that.
Wait a minute, Reince. You're just complained about unnamed sources. You're using an unnamed source.
Well, because I didn't ask for approval to use their name, but I will tell you this. When I say top-level people, I mean top-level people, okay?
Okay, so he's saying he's talking to top-level people who he won't name. Trump is screaming about unnamed sources and that you should always put your name on it. But it turns out that Reince Priebus apparently talked to the deputy at the FBI, a guy named McCabe. And it is that person that is being named now, Andrew McCabe. And Andrew McCabe and the White House Chief of Staff, Reince Priebus. McCabe works at the FBI. He's the deputy director right under Comey. And he says, he didn't tell Reince Priebus that. He didn't say that there was no investigation. He didn't say that the New York Times story was false. He didn't say any of these things. Now, all of a sudden, the White House goes to the FBI last night and asks the FBI to knock down the story, to say the New York Times is full of crap, to say CNN is full of crap, to say all this, the Chicago Tribune is full of crap. Everybody that reported that the Trump campaign aides had repeated contacts with Russian intelligence That's the story. That was the front page story in the New York Times. There's plenty of them around, okay? And then the Wall Street Journal story said that the intelligence briefings were being, let's say, they were being cut down to only the most important stuff, and details were being left out because they didn't believe that Trump wasn't a Russian operative. They don't trust him with our intelligence information. That's what Harry Reid said.
Give him fake briefings.
What does that even mean?
It means they'll tell him stuff. He won't know the difference.
Okay. So the discussions between the White House and the Deputy Director, Andrew McCabe, after the stories were published, where the White House said that Andrew McCabe disputed the story, saying that McCabe called Priebus early that morning and that the New York Times story vastly overstates what the FBI knows about the contacts. The White House corrected this now. And they say that their version of events is not what Reince Priebus said. So the same White House official that's now talking to CNN said that Priebus later reached out again to Andrew McCabe and also to FBI Director Comey and asked the FBI to at least talk to the reporters on background, unnamed sources, and dispute these stories. But the law enforcement official says McCabe did not discuss aspects of the case with Priebus at all. They won't talk about what they did discuss with Priebus. And James Comey rejected the request to even comment on these stories because the contacts between Russians known to U.S. intelligence and Trump associates is the subject of an ongoing investigation. So when Reince Priebus sits here and says the story is complete garbage and that the New York Times had no direct sources and that when the New York Times reports that the Trump campaign had constant contacts with Russian spies, which is kind of treasonous, and that he has permission to tell you that the people inside told him that this was garbage, turns out that the people inside deny that they ever told that to Priebus, that they won't discuss the case because it is an ongoing investigation, that they dispute what he's saying was told to him. And so today, the White House decided, well then, F it. We're just not going to allow CNN or the New York Times, or the New York Daily News, or the LA Times, or the BBC, or any legitimate news organization into these now private press briefings. We're only going to talk to Breitbart, we're only going to talk to the Washington Times, and we're only going to talk to these bloggers and Fox. That's it. They cut everybody out, they cut everybody off. This is the New York Times story. Phone records and intercepted calls show that members of Donald J. Trump's 2016 presidential campaign and other Trump associates had repeated contacts with senior Russian intelligence officials in the year before the election, according to 4 current and former American officials. American law enforcement and intelligence agencies intercepted the communications around the same time they were discovering evidence that Russia was trying to disrupt the presidential election by hacking into the Democratic National Committee, 3 officials said. The intelligence agencies then sought to learn whether the Trump campaign was colluding with the Russians on the hacking or other efforts to influence the election. The officials interviewed in recent weeks said that so far they had seen no evidence of cooperation. But the intercepts alarmed American intelligence and law enforcement agencies in part because of the amount of contact that was occurring while Mr. Trump was speaking glowingly about the Russian President Vladimir V. Putin. At one point last summer, Mr. Trump said at a campaign event he hoped Russian intelligence services would hack Hillary Clinton's emails and would make them public. The officials said the intercepted communications were not limited to Trump campaign officials and included other associates of Mr. Trump. On the Russian side, the contacts also included members of the government outside of the intelligence services, they said. All of the current and former officials spoke on the condition of anonymity because the continuing investigation is classified. The officials said that one of the advisors picked up the calls was Paul Manafort, who was Mr. Trump's campaign chairman for several months last year and had worked as a political consultant in Ukraine. The officials declined to identify the other Trump associates on the calls. The call logs and intercepted communications are part of a larger trove of information that the FBI is sifting through as it investigates the links between Mr. Trump's associates and the Russian government, as well as the hacking of the DNC, according to federal law enforcement officials. As part of its inquiry, the FBI has obtained banking and travel records and conducted interviews. Mr. Manafort, who has not been charged with any crimes, dismissed the official accounts in a telephone interview on Tuesday. This is absurd, he said. They have no idea what this is referring to. I have never knowingly spoken to Russian intelligence officers, knowingly. And I have never been involved with anything to do with the Russian government or the Putin administration or any other issues under investigation today. And then he added, quote, "It's not like these people wear badges that say I'm a Russian intelligence officer." Several of Mr. Trump's associates, like Mr. Manafort, have done business in Russia. And it's not unusual for an American businessman to come in contact with foreign intelligence officials, sometimes unwittingly, in countries like Russia and Ukraine, where the spy services are deeply embedded in society. Law enforcement officials did not say to what extent the contacts might have been about business. The officials would not discuss many details, including what was discussed on the calls, the identity of the Russian intelligence officials who participated, and how many of Mr. Trump advisors were talking to the Russians. It's also unclear whether the conversations had anything to do with Trump himself. A report from American intelligence agencies that was made public in January concluded that the Russian government had intervened in the election in part to help Mr. Trump, but did not address whether any members of the Trump campaign had participated in that effort. The intercepted calls are different from the wiretap conversations last year between Michael Flynn, Mr. Trump's former national security advisor, and Sergei Kislyak, Russian ambassador to the United States. In those calls, which led to Mr. Flynn's resignation Monday night, the two men discussed sanctions that the Obama administration imposed on Russia in December. The cases are part of American intelligence and law enforcement agencies' routine electronic surveillance of the communication of foreign officials. The FBI declined to comment. The White House also declined to comment Tuesday night. But earlier in the day, the press secretary, Sean Spicer, stood by Mr. Trump's previous comments that nobody from his campaign had contact with Russian officials before the election. Quote, "There's nothing that would conclude me that anything different has changed with respect to that time period," Mr. Spicer said in a response to the question. 2 days after the election, in November, Sergei Rybakov, the deputy Russian foreign minister, said, quote, "There were contacts during the campaign between Russian officials and Trump's team." Quote, "Obviously, we know most of the people from his entourage," Mr. Rybakov told Russia's Interfax news agency. The Trump transition team denied Rybakov's statement, saying that's not accurate. That came from Hope Hicks, a spokesman for Trump. The National Security Agency, which monitors the communications of foreign intelligence services, initially captured the calls between Trump's associates and the Russians as part of routine foreign surveillance. After that, the FBI asked the NSA to collect as much information as possible about the Russian operatives on the phone calls and to search through troves of previous intercepted communications that had not been analyzed. The FBI had closely examined at least 3 other people close to Mr. Trump, although it's unclear if their calls were intercepted. They are Carter Page, a businessman and foreign policy advisor to the campaign; Roger Stone, a longtime Republican operative who apparently says he's poisoned by polonium now; and Mr. Flynn. All of the men have strongly denied they had any improper contacts with Russian officials. As part of the inquiry, the FBI is also trying to assess the credibility of the information contained in a dossier that was given to the Bureau last year by former British intelligence operative. The dossier contained a raft of allegations of a broad conspiracy between Mr. Trump, his associates, and the Russian government. It also included unsubstantiated claims that the Russians had embarrassing videos that could be used to blackmail Mr. Trump. The FBI had spent several months investigating the leads in the dossier, has yet to confirm any of its most explosive claims. Senior FBI officials believe that the former British intelligence officer who compiled the dossier, Christopher Steele, has a credible track record. He briefed investigators last year about how he obtained the information. One American law enforcement official said the FBI agents had made contact with some of Mr. Steele's sources. The agency's investigation of Mr. Manafort began last spring as an outgrowth of a criminal investigation into his work for a pro-Russian political party in Ukraine and for the country's former president, Viktor Yanukovych. It focused on why he was in such close contact with Russian and Ukrainian intelligence officials. The Bureau did not have enough evidence to obtain a warrant for a wiretap of Manafort's communications, but it did have the NSA scrutinize the communication of the Ukrainian officials he met. The FBI investigation is proceeding at the same time that separate investigations into Russian interference in the election are gaining momentum on Capitol Hill. Those investigations by the House and Senate Intelligence Committee are examining not only the Russian hacking, but also the contacts, if any, that Mr. Trump's team had with Russian officials during the campaign. On Tuesday, top Republican lawmakers said that Mr. Flynn should be one focus of the investigation and that he should be called to testify before Congress. Senator Mark Warner of Virginia, the top Democrat on the Intelligence Committee, said the news about Mr. Flynn underscored, quote, how many questions still remain unanswered to the American people more than 3 months after Election Day, including who was aware of what and when. Mr. Warner said Mr. Flynn's resignation would not stop the committee from continuing to investigate Flynn or any other campaign official who may have had inappropriate and improper contacts with Russian officials prior to the election. That is the article that I think is fairly generous to Trump. Now, I got to tell you, all of a sudden there are a lot of dead Russians. A lot of dead Russians. You know, I compiled a little list of dead Russians, and it's pretty extreme. Why are they turning up dead? The Russians. In government, in high places, ambassadors, etc. Just dead. Well, some of them were killed, documentably killed. Others are just having like massive coronary infarctions. 48 after.
All things Randy at randyrhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a diversified media enterprises production. I'm Doug Cunningham. AFGE, the union representing EPA workers, commends newly confirmed EPA Administrator Scott Pruitt for opening a dialogue with frontline EPA workers on his first day. But AFGE President David Cox Sr. also says he's eager to see if Pruitt stands by a commitment to seek guidance from people who have made it their life's work to protect America's air and water. AFGE Council 238 President John O'Grady says as Trump scales back EPA's work, Pruitt will face inescapable realities that scaling back will have massive implications on EPA's work. RNs and staff at Delaware County Memorial Hospital have planned a 2-day unfair labor practices strike March 5th and 6th. Their nonprofit hospital was bought by Prospect Medical Holdings, a subsidiary of the multi-billion-dollar hedge fund Leonard Green and Partners. The nurses are trying to bargain their first labor contract as members of PASNAP, the Pennsylvania Association of Staff Nurses and Allied Employees. Angela Napolitano, president of the PASNAP local at the hospital, says staffing and patient care are big issues.
They have not wanted to face the staffing issue, which is a crisis for us at our hospital because they've decreased the amount of staff. A nurse used to have 5 patients at the maximum, and now on the medical surgical floors, they're giving them up to 7. The 5th and 6th of March is our scheduled strike, but we do have a meeting with them scheduled for the 28th of February. So we're hoping that they will come to the table with some more proposals for us. They've been lacking. We've given them all our proposals on staffing and other issues that are important to us.
Napolitano says so far, Prospect Medical and its hedge fund owner are not bargaining in good faith, are hostile to the union, and disrespecting the nurses.
It's not bargaining in good faith, and I believe it's anti-union. They make us wait. They say, we have a very important conference call, and they'll leave us sitting there for hours without coming back with proposals. Their main counsel is very anti-union and is very proud of the fact that 30% of unions in the country do not get a contract ever. He brought that up to us. Unfortunately for him, PASNAP has 100%, and he doesn't know the amount, the nurses, how dedicated we really are.
Sponsored by Ironworkers Impact, now reserving spots for this year's groundbreaking conference, welcoming contractors to grow their business by networking and attending world-class breakouts. More on this event in San Diego, happening March 19th through the 22nd, is found online at impact-net.org under Events.
WIN is made possible in part by the OPEIU, the Office and Professional Employees International Union.
Workers Independent News is proud to be heard on The Union Edge, Labor's Talk Radio. Live nationwide weekdays noon to 3 p.m. at theunionedge.com.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
The Randi Rhodes Show is brought to you by our partners at ITM Trading. Call them at 1-888-OWN-GOLD and ask for a free gold kit. 1-888-OWN-GOLD.
The Randi Rhodes Show is live on randyrhodes.com and the free Progressive Voices app for Android and iOS. Visit the App Store or progressivevoices.com now.
Here's a little list of dead Russians. This is really kind of interesting. I have all the newspaper articles right here about these dead Russians. The Russian consul, the head of the consular department at Russia's embassy in Greece, was found dead in his apartment in Athens. Initial signs suggested Andrei Malinin, 55, died of natural causes. He failed to report for work on Monday, did not answer his phone. He lived alone on a heavily guarded street. Russian officials confirmed the consul's death. Okay, that's one. There's a mystery death of an ex-KGB chief linked to the MI6 Chris Steele dossier. Okay, this is from the Telegraph. An ex-KGB chief suspected of helping the former MI6 spy Christopher Steele to compile his dossier on Donald Trump may have been murdered by the Kremlin and his death covered up, it has been claimed. This is in the Telegraph as well. His name's Oleg Erevinkin, a former general in the KGB and its successor, the FSB, was found dead in the back of his car in Moscow under mysterious circumstances. Erevinkin was a key aide to Igor Sechin, the former deputy prime minister and now head of Rosneft, the state-owned oil company, who was repeatedly mentioned in the dossier. Rosneft is who has the deal with ExxonMobil. The death of Erevinkin had prompted speculation that it is linked to Mr. Steele's explosive dossier, which was made public earlier this month. Mr. Trump has dismissed the dossier as fake news. The Russian state-run RIA Novosti news agency reported Erevinkin's body was, quote, found in a black Lexus, and a large-scale investigation has been commenced in the area. His body was sent to the FSB, which is the KGB morgue. No cause of death has been confirmed. They continue to investigate. So he's dead, and he's a former agent. He's a former general in the FSB, which is the KGB. Then you've got, just a couple days ago, the Russian ambassador to the United Nations, Vitaly Churkin, died suddenly in New York. He was just about to turn 65, remember? A prominent Russian diplomat has passed away while at work. The New York Post reported that Mr. Churkin became ill outside the Russian embassy on East 67th Street around 9:30 in the morning claiming, they said that he died of a heart attack. Okay, so we have him. He's dead. He's only 64. Then we have the senior Russian diplomat who was the chief advisor to the Latin American Affairs Department, Peter Polshikov. He died at his home, but he was actually shot in his apartment. A high-ranking Russian diplomat has reportedly been found dead from a gunshot wound at his Moscow home. Local media reported a senior civil servant in the foreign ministry was found dead at his home in Balaklavsky Prospect apartment block with a bullet wound in the head. That's an assassination. He was 56, and he was the chief advisor to Latin America, the Latin American department in the ministry. And then the Russian ambassador to Turkey was shot dead. You remember that? I pulled the video. I don't even want to show it. It's disgusting. Remember the video of the man who was at a art museum and all of a sudden some guy comes behind him and starts screaming, "Don't forget Aleppo," and just shot him dead? Remember that one? Yeah, in front of a crowd at this, very uber posh art gallery in Ankara. They killed the assailant, so he's dead, so we'll never know. But Andrei Karlov was the ambassador to Turkey, and he was only 62, and he was shot dead. And also today we have 2 Russian spies, one a cyber expert, charged with treason by Russia for helping the Trump campaign. Ivan Pavlov identified the three Russians as Ruslan Stoyanov, head of Kaspersky. You know Kaspersky, the computer company? Yeah, he's head of Kaspersky's computer incidents investigation team. So he's been arrested, and 2 officers working for the FSB, which is the KGB's Information Security Center, Sergei Malkolov and Dmitry Dukayev. My client, along with the others, have been charged with state treason and cooperating with U.S. intelligence services, Mr. Pavlov, who represents a 4th suspect, said. Mykolov, head of cybersecurity at the FSB, was reportedly detained in a meeting in December with officers grabbing him and putting a bag over his head before taking him away. Early December, FSB Colonel Sergei Mykolov, who was responsible for cyber wars and cyber attacks, was arrested by the FSB, yes, with a bag over his head. Sergei Markov, a member of the public chamber in the Russian parliament and an advisor to the Kremlin, told the Daily Beast the arrests were made at the time of heightened tensions between Washington and Moscow after U.S. intelligence officials accused Russian hackers of sabotaging last year's U.S. election in favor of President Donald Trump. Russian newspaper Kommersant first reported the arrest last week, which it said took place in December. The Kaspersky team, headed by Stoyanov, has been cooperating with the FSB since 2013 in analyzing cybercrime cases and offering expertise in criminal cases concerning cybersecurity. Kaspersky Labs confirmed Stoyanov's arrest, but said the charges related to a period before he joined the company. A Kremlin spokesperson said Russian President Vladimir Putin was aware of media reports about the arrests, but the Kremlin would not confirm anything about them. Vladimir Ankev, a journalist said to have lived in Ukraine, also has been arrested, the Financial Times reported. A Moscow court said Mr. Ankev is being held in pre-trial detention until March 8th. Mr. Ankev denies all wrongdoing, faces charges of hacking unnamed victims' private information. So you have all these dead Russians, and you've got people being rounded up in Russia and being accused of treason based on helping Chris Steele compile his dossier against, for opposition research against Donald Trump, and others from Kaspersky Labs, which, runs on American computers. They've been accused of treason as well, that they've been colluding with Donald Trump's campaign, or they've been colluding with Americans and intelligence agencies here in the United States. I mean, this is just so bizarre. This is like such a crazy, crazy thing. But let me tell you something. The only thing I can conclude from all of this is that Trump is a Russian turned FSB, KGB, whatever you want to call him. And that the Russians got their wildest wet dream. An American president who is a turned American agent in the White House. And that all the people that could speak about this are now being killed. So their testimony can never be taken because they're freaking dead. That's like a holy crap moment, isn't it? I mean, it just you just sit here and you put all these stories together. You listen to Donald Trump, and now he's blacking out our media today from briefings at the White House.
To speak to Randi, call now, you bastards. 561-270-3844.
Hello.
Randi Rhodes Air Force.
Buy a stinking podcast.
This is the top of the hour from the Progressive Voices channel on TuneIn. Instead of commercials, you've got progressive news and interviews right here at the top of the hour.
Hello, Progressive Voices TuneIn listeners. I'm Casey Hobbs.
And I'm Shane Mason, and we're the hosts of Nurse Talk Radio.
Here's what we're talking about this week.
When humor occurs by chance, it's entertainment, but when you use humor by choice, you get results.
There's so many ways that humor can benefit people who are experiencing chronic illness. And so the very first approach was that of diabetes. You know, with 1 in 10 people experiencing diabetes or pre-diabetic, it just seemed like a natural place to start. And I'm so passionate that people not just know that humor is good for them, but they take action. You know, so many people have heard, knowledge is power. It's close. But what really is powerful is the application. It's not about being funny. It's not about being a humor initiator. It's about being a humor appreciator. When we're young, so much of our humor comes from joy and delight. But later, as we grow older and we get more challenges, more conflicts in our life, more and more and more of our humor actually comes from pain. It's a relief from that pain. And so when can we find something funny in a humorous event? When we can have emotional distance from it.
Do you think that overall there's room for humor in business more now than there used to be? It seems like there's a little bit of improvement, especially with the tech industry does seem a little lighter than previous
Well, and
industries.
God knows we need it now more than ever.
Yes. Oh, my. Yeah, it's one of the things that's really fascinated me about humor because it can level the playing field. And at the same time, it can also be used to increase the hierarchy. And so this is one of the nuances that I get into. Is this a tool? Is this a weapon? How are you using it? What's the desired outcome? What's the desired outcome? And so you're so right. When we're working with a patient or a patient's family member or somebody like that, we're wanting to level that playing field so that they feel safe with us, that they feel a sense of trust with us. And so that's an affiliative kind of humor, a friendly kind of humor of, we're going to get through this together. And that's such an important tool in nursing.
And Karen, I think, are there some studies that show that this actually helps? Does it improve employee retention? Does it make staff more productive? There's got to be some data out there, yeah?
Absolutely. Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I was just reading the other day that, in terms of employee engagement, which is such a buzzword for people in terms of leadership, and humor is a wonderful way of keeping people engaged. But when you have engaged employees, the amount of productivity is increased. It lowers the amount of times that people are sick and absent from work. It increases the retention. And so, there's so many ways that this affects the bottom line for employers and for companies. And whether you look at it in terms of your corporate culture, whether you look at it in terms of your sales and marketing, it plays a role in each and every one of these. And in terms of resilience, it's most effective if you practice humor over a period of time on a regular basis. I like to give the analogy of, would you go to the gym for one day and then expect to run a marathon the next day? You wouldn't have the resilience that you would need. You need to build that up over time. Mm-hmm. But humor, if we use it on a regular basis and we use it over time, then we get those benefits that you're talking about.
So, Karen, can you share with us a time when you used humor in your personal life to get past a difficult time?
This was a very painful time for me because my mother was in the later stages of Alzheimer's. and I was taking her to a doctor's visit, and we were sitting in a waiting room, and she and I were the only ones in the room, and I'm just sitting there kind of waiting, and I have my eyes closed, and I hear someone say, "Make me laugh." And I looked around because I actually thought it was one of my nurse buddies who stuck their head in. Mm-hmm. And I looked around, there's nobody there, and I look at my mom, and she's looking at me. And my mother hasn't spoken probably for a month. Her face is very flat affect. And so I immediately kicked into a story that was one that we used to tell probably once every couple of months over a glass of wine. Hey, Mom, remember the time when we were over at Dillard's and you stuck your finger in the Tefal skillet, you thought it was a fake egg, and it started running all over the place. And all of a sudden her face begins to move and her eyes begin to sparkle, and then this noise comes up from deep in her throat, and she leans over and she just begins to laugh. Yeah. And the two of us just laughed and laughed and laughed for about a minute and a half, and we had that connection again. And it really made such an impact on me, the importance of laughter and smiling and humor, and how that is one of our most primitive forms of communication. Humor is a whole brain activity, and it affects the prefrontal cortex, it affects the limbic system, it affects the occipital lobe, and the gamma waves that are now generated across the entire brain. And so what I have found is that the humor is affecting the brain, which is then affecting the entire body. And it's such a holistic, wonderful mind-body connection because through the brain, it's affecting every single part of our lives.
Check out our show at nursetalksite.com and listen every Saturday and Sunday right here on Progressive Voices.
You've been listening to Top of the Hour on the Progressive Voices channel on TuneIn. Commercial-free interviews and exclusive progressive news and information at the top of the hour.
Mary had a little man. The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America. From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today.
Change has come to America.
Believe it. Knock, knock. Who's there?
Hey! It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show. Turn up your mind.
Chuck, I think the answer is no to that. I would know.
Okay, I want to go to the press conference on the issue of Russia. The president never seemed to answer the question that was asked 3 or 4 times there, which is, does he know for sure that anybody on his campaign, can he say definitively that nobody in his campaign, nobody that he's been associated with, had any contacts with any Russian agents?
No, first of all, the answer is no, and we don't know of any contacts with Russian agents, and that gets to that New York Times story, Chuck. I mean, we've spent days talking about a story that says that our campaign had constant contacts with Russian spies, and I can tell you, I've talked to the top levels of the intelligence community, and they've assured me that that New York Times story was grossly overstated and inaccurate and totally wrong. I know what the intelligence committees in the House and the Senate were told by the FBI, and I know what I was told, and what I will tell you is that story was total baloney. And in fact, Devin Nunes, who is the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, went on the record after he was informed by the FBI as to that story, and what did he say? He said it was total garbage. This is what we're talking about, Chuck. It's not all media. It's not everyone involved in the media. It is this sort of fake news stuff that...
Okay, you get the gist, all right? So now, all of a sudden, the FBI has rejected the White House request to publicly knock down the media report that was in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, all these, newspapers of record that said that Donald Trump and his associates had communicated with Russians, and that it was, that the intelligence agencies have these phone records and these intercepts to prove it. The White House official said late Thursday that the request to the FBI was only made after Reince Priebus indicated that it did not believe the reporting to be accurate and that he got it from the intelligence community. So the White House officials went to the Bureau and they went to other intelligence agencies investigating, and that's the key word, investigating the Russia matter. They said, why don't you go out there and even on background tell these newspapers that the reports are wrong and that there have been no contacts. Here's the problem. Direct communications between the White House and the FBI violate decades-old restrictions on such contacts. The White House is not allowed to get in the way of an FBI or an NSA or a CIA or a DNI investigation. They're not allowed to do what they're doing. So Priebus says, and this is all in reaction to these Sunday shows last Sunday. This Sunday should be just a barrel of monkeys, right? He said, we didn't try to knock the story down. We asked them to tell the truth. The discussions between the White House and the Bureau began with FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe, the White House Chief of Staff, Rice Priebus, on the sidelines at a separate White House meeting the day after the stories were published, according to a U.S. law enforcement official. The White House initially disputed the story, and they said that McCabe called Rice Priebus early in the morning and said, hey, that New York Times story, it vastly overstates what the FBI knows. The White House official later corrected their version of events to confirm what the law enforcement originally described. The same White House official said that Priebus later reached out again to McCabe and then went even further, because he's a deputy. He went to James Comey, the director, and asked Comey to at least talk to reporters to dispute the stories. The White House issued a denial, its own denial, saying this is complete garbage, which I just played you. But the New York Times, said, no, they stand by their story. And by the way, Comey is really freaking upset because the White House isn't supposed to be contacting him. And where is Jeff Sessions? He's Comey's boss. Sessions says, I'm reviewing the memos. Now, you remember this story came out. This is the Valentine's Day Massacre. That's what I'm going to call it from now on, because that New York Times story came out on Valentine's Day. 3 days later, on February 17th, that's when Comey went up to the Hill, remember? And he had a meeting, a classified private meeting with the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. They had a briefing with Comey about Russia. And the senators who, they were very tight-lipped about it. It must be pretty damn serious, because Senator Lankford of Oklahoma, who was a member of the Intelligence Committee, said, quote, every briefing we go to, we gain new information. Left it at that. Angus King of Maine declined to reveal what was discussed during the Comey briefing, but he said, when he was asked about Priebus's strong denial of the claims, Senator King said he was surprised that Reince would be so categorical, which means whatever Comey told the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence in a closed session, in a closed briefing, is running counter to what Reince is saying. And, little wonder, because nothing that comes out of the White House is provably true. Kellyanne Conway was punished for a week. She was off the TV for a week because she was hawking Ivanka stuff. Reince has been caught telling lies, 8 ways to Sunday. Spicer, everybody that goes to these press conferences has walked out saying he's very loose with the truth. He's very loose with the truth. This man does not tell the truth. He says stupid things like Title IX. This goes to the transgender bathroom protections. Title IX is a federal code. It's part of a federal code having to do with discrimination, equal protection under law for all people without regard to race, religion, sexual orientation, etc., right? That's federal. Now, all of a sudden, he's talking yesterday about he's going to go after marijuana. He's going to go after recreational marijuana. That's not federal law. That's state law. obviously it's state law. It's been litigated to death, right? Because Colorado has recreational marijuana. Washington State, I believe, is also, enjoying a big business in recreational marijuana. So they got everything like ass backwards. What is a states' rights issue, marijuana, is now a federal crime, is now going to be a federally enforced crime. And what is a federal code, Title IX, is now a states' rights issue. Everything is up is down, black is white. We're through the looking, and nothing that comes out of the White House is provably true. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. You know, today at CPAC, they were handing out little Trump flags. Have you seen them? They're Russian flags. They're literally Russian flags. It's the same flag as Russia. There you go. Thank you very much, Captain Leary. You can see that, they're handing out these Russian flags at CPAC. These little pro-Trump flags. They're exactly the same as the Russian flag. Look, you see the staffers passing them out. You see people here showing them to the camera. All these nice, pasty white people showing them to the camera over here. Michael Flynn did resign. Okay, we didn't imagine that. Russian ambassadors, Russian KGB agents are showing up dead all over the place. One actually was shot to death on TV. One was shot in the head in his apartment in Greece. Couple of them in their 50s had heart attacks suddenly. One was found just dead in his car, 55 years old. I mean, wouldn't you think that these are the Russian contacts that people are talking about? Because why all of a sudden are they showing up dead everywhere? And doesn't that mean that it's like very Michael Corleone? I got to say, it's that like Trump is sitting in a meeting, with the heads of the 5 families, and then you cut away to all the assassinations going on, right? You know, it's so interesting because Trump had all these business, these big business people up to the White House yesterday. Remember the heads? It looked like it looked exactly like the meeting in Cuba in The Godfather. It looked exactly like it. They were going, they were passing the gold phone around. And they were saying, and this is Mr. So-and-so from the American Fruit Company, and this is Mr. So-and-so from AT&T. And Trump just did this with all these business. This is the head of Archer Daniels Midland, and this is that. And just as he was introducing them, I swear I was only listening to it on the radio. And I was listening to CNN, in my car. And all of a sudden, like the scene of the Cuba meeting with Michael Corleone and Hyman Roth, being brought down to Cuba to see if they would invest in Cuban hotels and in the Cuban casino business with all the, it was just like it was identical. It was identical. And now they're all turning up dead. All these Russian contacts turning up dead. It's just so crazy. It's so crazy. And you can only conclude that Donald Trump is part of the Russian mafia and that he has been turned by the case. And why? Listen, let me tell you some of the president's real ties to Russia, the things he denies, okay? But they're true. He admitted, during the campaign that finally, yes, Russia hacked. Now he's gone back to saying they didn't. But he did for a brief moment say that Russia hacked the elections. But he kept saying it could be a 400-pound guy on his bed, and it could be the Chinese. He didn't know. Finally, he just said, yes, the Russians. It was well, in 2013, Donald Trump made millions of dollars. He partnered with a Russian billionaire named Aris Aglarov to host the Miss Universe pageant. Then he tried to build a Trump Tower in Moscow, and that fell through before it started. In 2007, Trump was deposed, and he was asked about the deal in Moscow for a Trump International Hotel and Tower. And under oath, I actually have the deposition here. See, this is it. This is the deposition, and you see how I've highlighted the pertinent parts. Okay, the attorney was Mary Jo White. Yeah, she's a federal judge now. Mary Jo White. She said, are you aware of the names of the investors or other parties in Russia with whom Mr. Arif had discussions? He said, no, I'm not. So what was this proposal? Donald Trump. Oh, this was going to be a hotel in Moscow. And I really can say the same thing for all the sites. So, you don't have to waste a lot of time. This was going to be a hotel in Moscow. a hotel in Kiev, that's Ukraine, a hotel in Poland, etc., etc., the list you have. Bayrock. Remember yesterday we went over Bayrock? Bayrock knew the people, knew the investors, and in some cases, I believe they were friends of Mr. Arif. And this was going to be Trump International Hotel and Tower, Moscow, Kiev, Istanbul, Turkey, etc. Poland, Warsaw. She said, I appreciate that. I need to go piece by piece because I'd like to just understand your... He said, well, the answer is the same, though. What I'm saying to you is that these were deals that were going to be, they were going to be done. But they really were at the same level. In other words, they were deals that Bayrock had access to. I didn't have access to. And Mr. Arif told me that the article in the New York Times book immediately killed those deals. Miss White, let me make a comment. It's not going to expedite things to try and summarize. I appreciate what you're trying to do. He said, okay, yeah, because Mary Jo, it's basically the same thing. She said, I understand. He said, fine. If you want to go individually, she said, where was the hotel project in Moscow that you were discussing? He says, I have that information in my office. I don't know Moscow, so I can't really, but I have the information in my office. She said, was it at the location of Hotel Roslia? He said, I'd have to get you that information. She said, you don't have it sitting here today? He said, I have to get you all the information, all of the sites, because I don't know the cities. She said, when did you first hear about the Moscow project? He said, prior to the book coming out. And of course, the book is the book that, what's his name? Klein, I think his name is, Trump ended up suing him because the book that came out said Donald Trump wasn't worth as much as Donald Trump claimed to be worth. And the Russians, he claimed the Russians read that and all of a sudden he wasn't going to be valuable to them in some way. And they dropped the deal in Moscow. She said, what during these 6 months were you discussing with regard to this Moscow deal? He said, just that it was a Trump International Hotel and Tower. It would be a non-exclusive deal. So it would not have precluded me from doing other deals in Moscow, which was very important to me. He always says that. It's very important to me. And he said it was a good location. Again, it's not a city I'm familiar with. I was there twice. But it's not a city I was, familiar with. So I have information as to location in the office. And then she said, did you meet with any individuals in Moscow or here other than Mr. Arif relating to this deal? The answer to that is no, I take it. And he said, I don't know. Because he did bring people up from Russia. And I do believe it was their site. So you have to ask Mr. Arif. But they were talking about a number of deals in Moscow, and this was one of them. And I believe he brought whatever. Okay. So he had that. Then he's got Trump vodka. Okay, Trump vodka, 8,000 cases of vodka to try and make headway into the Russian market. He's got a sale of a Palm Beach mansion to a Russian billionaire named Dmitry Rabakolev. And then you have Donald Trump Jr. in 2008 saying the Trump businesses, quote, see a lot of money pouring in from Russia. And in terms of high-end product influx into the U.S., Russians make up a pretty disproportionate cross-section of a lot of our assets, say in Dubai, and certainly with our project in Soho, that's Bayrock, and anywhere in New York. We see a lot of money pouring in from Russia. There's indeed a lot of money coming for new builds and resale, reflecting a trend in the Russian economy and, of course, the weak dollar versus the ruble. Then Trump hired a law firm called Suja Patent in Russia to file at least 8 trademarks in Russia between 1996 and 2008, including Trump, Trump Home, Trump Tower. Then you've got the Bayrock Group, which is run by Soviet immigrants, and according to a lawsuit filed, financed by Russia and Kazakhstan money, which we went over yesterday, and together they developed Trump properties in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and New York. Well, the Fort Lauderdale thing never came to be. They also planned on opening a Trump Tower in Moscow. But Trump said that deal fell through after they started, that book questioned his net worth. Then you got Manafort, who suddenly is working on the Trump campaign as a lobbyist to Viktor Yanukovych, doesn't register as a foreign agent, but does this work, which is illegal. His company, Davis Manafort International, LLC, they retained a man named Mr. Edelman to work on Yanukovych's visibility in the U.S. and Europe. A lawsuit filed by Ukraine's former prime minister, Tymoshenko, describes Manafort as a, quote, key advisor to President Yanukovych and other Ukraine political figures since approximately 2003. Then you have Carter Page, named as a foreign policy advisor to the Trump campaign, who spent years in Moscow. He's the one that made the deal with Rosneft. You got Richard Burt, who has longstanding ties to the Russian diplomatic. I mean, it goes on and on. I mean, I have tons of stuff. This is crazy. But how else do we explain Trump's humping of Vladimir Putin, the mafia, the deaths of all these Russian, ambassadors, the intel agencies, the NSA, the CIA, investigating Trump and Trump's aides and constant contact with Russia? I mean, there must be something there because they're still investigating it. Comey just last Friday goes up to the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence and has a closed-door briefing with them. They all walk out and they're like shocked and pasty white and like, oh my God. And they're so tight-lipped about it because this is so important that they don't leak it. And now Trump is shutting out every reputable news service from the BBC to the New York Times and only inviting in Breitbart and bloggers and the Washington Times, which is, a bizarro right-wing sicko newspaper. What is that?
All things Randy at randyrhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
Buy a stinking podcast. I love me some beef jerky. I do. I love beef jerky. People make fun of me, but if you're a jerky lover, we're real picky about the jerky. You want big protein, big flavor, big packs, and very little carbs. And that's why my favorite snack is jerky, but you can't get the best stuff at the gas station. You can't even get it at the supermarket. You have to order it online from the best purveyors of jerky I've ever found, Herky Jerky. Herky Jerky is the official snack of the Randi Rhodes Air Force, and it comes in elk, buffalo, beef, and bacon. Oh, yes, bacon, hot, mild, 14 other incredible flavors too. And right now, get $6 off your order of $50 or more. And these aren't little 3-ounce frou-frou bags of jerky. These are big, beautiful, nearly 1-pound bags of fresh, delicious, perfectly spiced jerky that bites and chews like homemade jerky should. Go to herkyjerky.com and buy your 12.5 or 2-pound pack and take them with you everywhere. School, work, camping, or just stick the sticks in your bag for quick protein that feels and tastes like heaven. herkyjerky.com.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
We have been through the story of 11-year-old Grace Bedell's letter to Abe Lincoln suggesting he should let his whiskers grow. Lincoln wrote a return missive telling her he had never worn any whiskers before. But soon after Grace's letter, Lincoln started letting his whiskers grow, and by the time he began his trip to Washington for the inauguration, he had a full beard. Coincidentally, the train route went through Grace's hometown of Westfield, New York. Speaking to the crowd, he announced that he had a little correspondent from Westfield and called her by name to approach if she was there, and her father took her to the front. Grace Bedell Billings lived until 1936, but one moment she never forgot was Abe Lincoln climbing down to sit with her to talk. At the end, he told her he was growing the beard for her. He kissed her goodbye, and she never saw him again. This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
Now that Trump's moved into the White House, I know. You could see he wasted no time. He went to work for his ultra-wealthy pals. He's making fundamental economic changes that are going to affect your money and your retirement. He's chipping away at banking regulations. He's going after Dodd-Frank, and that unwinds the fiduciary rule. That's a rule that keeps your money safe from deceptive financial practices. Like I said before, this administration is so awful. They are so greedy. And that's why now, more than ever, is the best time to diversify your retirement portfolio like I did. Gold's low low correlation with stocks and bonds can help you in times of uncertainty. Call my friends at ITM Trading. Get a free gold kit. Learn why gold survives every government, every currency, every economic crisis. Call ITM today at 1-888-OWN-GOLD for guidance from their precious metals experts. They've helped thousands of people just like me buy gold and silver coins and bars, and they can help you too. 1-888-OWN-GOLD. Call 1-888-OWN-GOLD.
Allison is perfect. I mean, she'd never tell you that. She's perfect. Allison, wait, are you texting and driving? Texting and driving makes good people look bad. Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org, brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
For a commercial-free, on-demand, whenever, wherever listening experience, visit RandyRhodes.com for your personal premium podcast today.
All right. Eddie in San Jose, hi. May I help you? How may I direct your call?
Edward.
He's in a meeting. I hear you breathing. Let's try Rich in Denver.
Hi, Randy. This is Eddie. I think we got our lines
Oh,
wrong.
yeah. Okay.
So what I was going to say was, not only is it these Russian guys they're not only getting whacked,
yes,
but they're also getting arrested and charged with treason, like you pointed out.
Yes, there's 4 of them. 3 have been arrested, and they said they're doing one more. There'll be one more.
Yeah, and I read some of this stuff, but last month some of it came out in the New York Times, and what they were kind of hinting at is they couldn't pin down when these Russians. It basically, a lot of these arrests and deaths had occurred all through last year, but the CIA had been investigating connections between Russia and Trump since last February. So what I was reading and interpreting, and I hope this isn't a conspiracy theory, could some of these guys have spoken to U.S. intelligence officials and then gotten in trouble for it?
Say that again, that some of these guys what?
So, some of these guys over the course of last year had been speaking to U.S. intelligence who had been looking into the connections between Russia and the Trump campaign.
Yeah.
So is that what got some of these guys arrested or killed?
Well, I think what's happened is, Putin was all too happy to have them do this work. But now that it's been exposed, he's got to kill these people so that there's no witness. Do you know what I mean?
Well, and Priebus, in that clip you played, Priebus says that he knows what the FBI and the CIA told the Intelligence Committee.
Yes.
Well, if he knew that in December, then so did the other Trump aides and the national security team. So did they leak? I mean, could sources and methods have been leaked in December to Russian intelligence? Somehow they figured out, so all of a sudden the Americans know this secret. We better arrest or whack this guy.
Yes.
Putin's saying that. That's what I know it sounds conspiratorial.
But it would have to be, it would have, I mean, the idea that we had a guy on the campaign trail who was acting like Putin's puppet, who was talking like he loved Putin, who was willing to say right into the GOP platform that we would not provide, help to our NATO allies in the way of lethal force. And that we would soften our stance on NATO, and that we had a guy on the campaign trail. Nobody even understood why was NATO on his radar screen. Obviously, it's a desire of the Russians to not have America fight, on behalf of NATO allies if Russia tries to annex them, or if Russia tries to invade them, if Russia tries to, rebuild the Soviet Union, rebuild the old USSR, which is what Putin's wet dream is. He really believes that Russia's best days are behind them because the Soviet bloc doesn't exist anymore, and he wants Estonia, and he wants Lithuania, and he wants all these places back into the Soviet Union. He wants to recreate the USSR, which doesn't exist anymore. And if Donald Trump is like saying, I don't give a rat's ass, take whatever you want, to go ahead and invade all your neighbors, I don't care. And Putin says to him, well, here's what has to happen. Well, we need proof. And so you got to go out there and say it out loud that, and also I want it written down somewhere, that you will not defend the NATO allies, like Turkey. You won't defend the NATO allies, and that you think that that Soviet Union can, invade its neighbors like Crimea because the Crimeans wanted to be part of Russia anyway. Meanwhile, 8,000 people in Crimea died. They died in that war. But you go out there and you say they wanted to be part of Russia. You know, you give me a sign that you're down with disbanding NATO. Give me a sign that you're not going to send lethal weaponry to any of the people that we want to invade and reintegrate into the Soviet. And why do they want these places? Because they have oil and gas, right? So, you know, it would have to be a conspiracy.
Yeah, and oil and gas is two key words. I mean, look at the guy coming in, Tillerson, coming into the State Department, but also look at a guy like Wilbur Ross, the Commerce Secretary.
Cole.
He's the co-chair of a bank in Cyprus. And Cyprus had a banking meltdown, a crisis a couple of years back, and it basically, in uncovering how that banking system melted down, they figured out it was completely infested with flight capital from Russia and the former Soviet Union, all those kleptocrats and mafia guys stealing money out of those former Soviet republics. And the thing about making investments, if you've stolen money, you go to anybody whose door is open, and the Trump organization's door was open 10 years ago. You've covered this on your show.
Yes, flight capital from Russia. Absolutely. And what's really crazy is now you've got a guy in Greece, in Athens, who turns up dead, shot in the head in his apartment.
Right. And well, you mentioned this guy Felix Sater.
Yes.
I mean, he's been arrested.
By the way, that's Bayrock, okay? That's Bayrock, right, for everybody following this story. And this is what he said in a deposition. Bayrock brought them to me. That's Felix Sater. Okay, right. That's who that guy is. And Felix Sater is a Ukrainian-born guy who was put in jail for stabbing a guy in the throat, in the neck with a with a margarita glass stem. And then when he got out of jail, he became part of the Russian mafia. He's been stock fraud. He's been what else did he do? I mean, he's got a long rap sheet.
Well, he turned turned basically informant for the FBI and the intelligence.
Right, because
he knew people who were smuggling anti-aircraft missiles. It's basically,
right.
That's the story that I got, that I read in the New York Times anyway. And so this is from the late 90s when all this flight capital, this Wild West in Russia started.
Right.
And basically, I was going to mention, because I think you talked about the other day, the movie for that, for people who want to see a visual reference, would be something like Lord of War with Nicolas Cage, where he played an international arms dealer. He was living in New York, smuggling weapons into third world countries, smuggling ex-former Soviet Union weaponry into conflicts in the third world. And this is a long-standing mafia operation.
Yes, and
but it's connected with Putin too.
Yes, let's bring it back home. Okay, let me bring it back home. Yeah. Bayrock. Okay, Bayrock brokered a $50 million investment in Trump Soho. Okay, that's what he was testifying to in that case there. That Bayrock, they were helping them build that Trump Tower Soho, which is an ugly glass building with Chinese glass and Chinese steel. But
it's like a condo thing.
Yes, and the money was laundered through Iceland by a firm that is preferred by the oligarchs of Russia who are in favor with Vladimir Putin. The Icelandic company is called FL Group. They are a Bayrock investor, a strategic partner with Alexander Mashkovich, a billionaire charged in a corruption case involving fees paid by a Belgian company seeking business in Kazakhstan.
Right, and that country's banking system also melted down. But I was going to just, before I leave, last point, Cyprus's banking system that melted down, Wilbur Ross was the guy who was in a bank. He was the co-chair of the Bank of Cyprus. His partner in that bank was a former CEO from Deutsche Bank. And they basically invested in it to turn it around after the collapse.
And Deutsche Bank is currently under investigation by our government.
Yes.
And Jeff Sessions will be in charge of that investigation.
Yes, and the British have already looked into it because there was a branch in Russia, a Deutsche Bank branch in Russia. Something like $10 billion were laundered, basically flight capital laundered through that branch, and I think the British have already fined Deutsche Bank something like $600 million or something for that particular meltdown.
Yeah,
but. You're on the right track, and I think your listeners should really feel honored that you're tracking all this stuff, because it will all come out. It's just going to take time.
Unless he kills everybody who could testify.
Unless everyone winds up whacked.
which is very Don Corleone. I mean, it really is mafia stuff. There's no question that all these people are turning up dead, and that our intelligence agencies are trying to figure out who Chris Steele talked to for this MI6 dossier, and the people that he talked to are now being charged with treason or ending up dead. Treason means they're gonna have them in Russian custody. You'll never be able to interview them.
Well, and if you get a chance later on,
or the Russian government will kill them.
Well, exactly. Well, if you get a chance later on, also check into Deutsche Bank because.
I have.
Well, because Trump actually sued Deutsche Bank for $3 billion. And that was after he in 2008, after the financial meltdown, he failed to make a $64 million payment to Deutsche Bank on a loan that was outstanding. He countersued for I think it was $3 billion, and then 2 years later they settled, and Deutsche Bank kept doing business with him. And the question is why? And I think that might lead to some of these Russia ties personally, because money just kept pumping into his accounts from Russians through this Deutsche Bank branch in Moscow. Again, it's all conspiratorial. But it's not gonna stop.
It isn't conspiratorial. When you look at all these newspaper articles, one after the other, then you lay them all out in a row, you start to see that the New York Times reported everything about this. Okay, they reported who Mr. Arif was. Tevfik Arif. He's a Soviet-era commerce official. He's also from Kazakhstan. That's who Trump was testifying about. Mr. Arif brought the Bayrock people to me because I wanted to build Trump Tower in Moscow in a non-exclusive deal so I could do more business in Moscow. Okay, that's what he testifies to. Now you look at, Trump Soho in New York. Mr. Arif brings the Bayrock people. That's Felix Sater. Okay, Felix Sater is a convicted criminal and a known Russian mafia operative. Then you look at the money coming in from Kazakhstan, and you look at the money that's coming in from Istanbul, and you look at the money that came in from Poland, all laundered through the same Bayrock group so that he could build Trump Istanbul, Trump Warsaw, and Trump Moscow. I mean, it's incredible. And obviously, they didn't want to do business with him because he's not worth what he says he's worth unless he was in some position of power. I think that they said, you know what, wouldn't it be great if you could control all the levers of power, because your power is more important than your money. You don't have enough money to play with these to play with me. I'm worth many, many billions of dollars, Vladimir Putin would say. I own everything. And my friends, they all walk away billionaires. You're a piker. You're a piker in my book. I know what your loans are because, they're being laundered through our banks. So if you run for president, and you can control all the levers of power, maybe then we'll give you the business that you want. Maybe then. But you're going to have to prove your loyalty as a member of the Russian oligarch society, or as a member of the mafia, or whatever the hell they call themselves. And don't worry, whoever, you do business with, because on the back end, if they ever say anything, don't worry, we'll take care of them. You know what we do to people that leak.
Everyone disappears.
They just disappear.
Yep. Thanks, Randy. Happy Friday.
Thank you. I mean, this is just amazing, and it's all these Soviet era countries, all these ex-Soviet countries where all this is the stands. That's why I keep saying it's the stands too, the Kazakhstans of the world. It's also Lithuania, and it's Poland, and it's Estonia, and I'm telling you, these little Baltic states that are just beautiful. Got to say, I've been there. Their intelligence are the people that are giving our intelligence those transcripts. Okay, it's not illegal for them to do it, and trust me, they know these names too.
For a commercial-free, on-demand, whenever, wherever listening experience, visit randyrhodes.com for your personal premium podcast today.
I'm David Pakman, host of The David Pakman Show on the Progressive Voices channel. Check out this clip from my show. Donald Trump staffers have admitted to planting what is effectively propaganda news. Some call it fake news to counter Trump's Twitter meltdown. So the backstory is that Donald Trump regularly tweets absolutely insane stuff, insults, threats, unhinged political statements, conspiracy theories, all that sort of stuff to Twitter. And we found out that In the last few days of the presidential campaign, Trump basically had access to Twitter completely cut off. But we're now learning about what was the more ongoing strategy to prevent embarrassing Twitter meltdowns during the campaign, which obviously didn't work. 6 former campaign officials have gone public as how they tried to keep Trump's tweeting under control. They would try to keep his personal media consumption to mostly praise. When Trump would see a criticism of himself, that would often trigger the worst of his tweeting. So staffers would try to only put in front of him positive stories. When they couldn't find positive stories, they would try to plant positive stories by contacting right-wing media and trying to get friendly stories posted so then they could print those out and give them to Trump. Quote from a former communications director named Sam Nunberg: "If candidate Trump was upset about unfair coverage, it was productive to show him that he was getting fair coverage from outlets that were persuadable." Staffers benefited from the reality that Trump barely ever read anything online. They could actually limit Trump's news universe by printing out only positive news, which is absolutely amazing. And a lot of it was mitigation, which is they tried to line things up in media to counter a disastrous tweet. So remember, for example, when Trump went on Twitter and started slamming Gold Star father Khizr Khan, whose army captain's son died in combat, Trump started slamming Khizr Khan on Twitter. The Trump staffers set up a meeting for Trump with Gold Star Mothers of Florida and then planted the story in conservative media to try to push back. Another example is when former Miss Universe Alicia Machado was calling out Trump for referring to her as Miss Piggy and Miss Housekeeping. The communications team scrambled to put a story in Fox News and the Washington Examiner and Breitbart that was a positive story about Trump's relationship to women or whatever. I actually think that the main story, which is a team had to try to manage Trump's Twitter use, that's not the main story. The revelation for me is that there were individuals who admitted that they were planting stories with right-wing media, which means they were in direct contact during the campaign in a way that suggests that they were heavily influencing coverage of Trump, which suggests to me, Pat, that they're probably still in contact now within the Trump White House. And that while Trump is calling any negative press fake news, the practical reality is that a lot of the Trump coverage you're seeing in right-wing news has maybe been planted there by Trump staffers themselves.
Well, that's certainly the new revelation from this. But what's more fascinating to me is that they have to find this roundabout solution to limiting Donald Trump's Twitter use. You think that, you know, this guy's on the precipice of being elected president of the United States. You can kind of just take that away from him, similar to President Obama's staff taking away his BlackBerry over privacy and hacking concerns.
Wasn't he messaging with like Scarlett Johansson and stuff like that? And then the team said, you can't do it anymore. It's not secure.
I don't remember the specifics, but I mean, Donald Trump promised he would stop using Twitter once he became president. That's another broken campaign promise.
Yeah, it hasn't happened. If you're one of these staffers, why do you stay working for Trump, right? I mean, if your job is to micromanage him through childish tantrums on the internet, how do you justify staying on board? I guess Hillary's emails or something like that.
You've been listening to part of the David Pakman Show on the Progressive Voices channel. For full audio and video podcasts, interviews, and more, go to davidpakman.com and check out our YouTube channel at youtube.com/The David Pakman Show.
The Randi Rhodes Show is brought to you by our partners at ITM Trading. Call them at 1-888-OWN-GOLD and ask for a free gold kit. 1-888-OWN-GOLD.
All things Randi at RandiRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
A real job is to get in here and get those sanctions lifted. But all of them want them lifted because this Klan, this Kremlin Klan, is all about getting the oil and gas money and doing the drilling. And they need this president. They need this president to get these sanctions lifted. And don't forget, the second executive order that was signed by the president, that was 1504, which basically would undo the work that we had done with Dodd-Frank in making these oil companies disclose the money that they were using to bribe these countries with in Africa and other places. And so 1504 was very important because Exxon and others now will not have to disclose all of the bribes that they're doing. But these people are all organized around oil and gas. Why are they all in this administration? Why are they all so close to them? And you alluded to and talked about what is going on with this proposal that is being pushed by Michael Cohen, the president's personal lawyer, who delivered the document. Felix F. Sater, a business associate who helped Mr. Trump scout deals in Russia, and a Ukrainian lawmaker trying to rise in a political opposition movement shaped in part by Mr. Trump's former campaign manager, Paul Manafort. Can't people see what's going on? Why do you think they hacked into our election? They hacked into the election because they have to make sure that Donald Trump got elected so that he could help them with what I think is a huge deal, not only to lift these sanctions, but to take over, all of these Soviet countries and pull them back into the Soviet Union so that they could have access to all of these resources. It's clear to me. And I just think the American people had better understand what's going on. This is a bunch of scumbags. That's what they are.
Those are very strong words,
organized around making money.
Who do you mean by that when you call them scumbags? Who are you talking about?
All of these people who are organized with these oil and gas interests that's in the administration and friends of the President of the United States, this back channeling that you see, these are a bunch of scumbags.
Secretary of State, you mean the Secretary of the State of the United States?
Well, I tell you this, Tillerson is there to get these sanctions lifted. I believe it. Just watch him. He's going to continue to work on it. This is important for him. He was there because he negotiated the deal for Exxon with Putin.
All right. Well, there's going to be a big fight over that if that happens. Congresswoman Maxine Waters, thanks for your time.
She's right. Maxine Waters is right. And I got news for you. I've said this for a very long time. I said this since 2002 in the build-up to the Iraq War. I told you the only way to ever get out from under these oil wars, the only way to stop this kind of conquering and war making and deal making and back channels is to make what they have worthless. And by that, I mean oil. Oil has to be made worthless. And that's what the United States and other European countries wanted to do. They wanted to do renewables. They wanted to get out from under oil, coal, gas, all of it. They wanted renewable energy. That's why Pruitt from Oklahoma, who sued the EPA, is now the head of the EPA. That's why climate change conversations are wiped off of the White House website. The goal here is to make oil worthless to save lives. Literally, I mean, I know a lot of people, you think save lives with climate change means asthma and no, I'm talking about the oil wars have got to stop, and they will not stop until oil is worthless. So it's all tied up together with the president's agenda of promoting oil and gas and the taking of oil in Iraq. Take the oil, take the oil. I told you, Donald Trump in the oil, Donald Trump in the oil. But I told you, take the oil, right?
I would bomb the hell out of those oil fields. We'll circle it and we'll take the oil. And we should have taken the oil when we left. I would take away their wealth. I would take away the oil. What you should be doing now is taking away the oil. I've always said, shouldn't be there, but if we're going to get out, take the oil. If we would have taken the oil, you wouldn't have ISIS. If we're going to leave, keep the oil. Keep the oil. Keep the oil. Don't let somebody else get it. Remember, I've been saying for 2 years, attack the oil. Everybody said, Trump with the oil, Trump. But I said more than attack it. I said attack it, take it, and keep it. So we should have kept the oil. But, okay. Maybe you'll have another chance.
Oil. It's all about oil. All of this is about oil. All of it. It's about resources and oil and a deal between ExxonMobil and the Kremlin. It's a deal between the Canadians also. I'm talking about Russian Canadian entrepreneurs, Talent International. It's run by Val Levitan and Alex Schneider, Russian Canadian entrepreneurs. They manufacture slot machines and they created banknote validation technology and he's in the steel business, post glasnost, and all these people, they're all helping Russia explore and exploit more resources, oil and gas resources, for the benefit of Russia. They want to be, and what's really sad, because Russia's almost entire economy is dependent on oil and gas. They're almost entirely dependent on oil and gas. Russia is near the brink of collapsing. And that's why they needed a president of the United States to help them. Not only to prevent them from collapsing, which they're on the verge of without his help, but also to conquer the neighbors and add more oil and gas to the ledger, because it isn't enough to support Russia. It's a very sick thing. But the only way around it is to make oil and gas worthless by finding other ways to power countries. And the Northern European countries who are closest to Russia, they're doing it really quickly because they are too close for comfort. They understand it. All right, where? Rick in Los Angeles.
Hey, Randy, great show.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, this whole thing about everybody showing up dead, it's very scary.
It's unbelievable.
Dead men tell no tales.
Exactly.
And, they can't testify, so, all you have is whatever, intercepts you might have. And you'd have to somehow show that, the dead people, somehow identify it was them on the other line, That's one of the difficulties. So you'd have to get somebody who could recognize their voice.
It's interesting.
So, and this whole thing about, Spicer going to Comey's deputy or whatever to try to, spin the news. I mean, that is just... That's total obstruction of justice.
Yes,
that's
I was just going to say that is obstruction of justice, and also the Justice Department has rules. Even though they have Jeff Sessions, where it's kind of hard to imagine that there are any rules left. But he's saying Trump tweeted today, they can't even find the leakers within the FBI itself. Classified information is being given to media that could have a devastating effect on us. Find now. Now, I think he meant U.S., but he wrote us. And it's him. I mean, how many times does the target of an FBI investigation have to turn up dead? Or how many times does the target of an FBI investigation have the gall to ask the head of the FBI to say it's all nothing?
Yeah.
I mean, they're the target of this investigation, and they go to the FBI and they say, we want you to tell the media that this investigation against us is nothing.
Yeah,
that is obstruction of justice. I mean, there's no question about it. It's like, so the president's chief of staff tries to interfere with an ongoing investigation of people in the White House. That's not even new. That's so 1972.
Right. I mean, the problem we have, Randy, is the people doing the investigation are beholden to Trump. I mean, Sessions, you expect him to be independent?
No,
way.
I don't. I don't.
And so
but I do. Listen, I'll tell you what's going to happen in the House. Mark my words, because he keeps bringing up Devin Nunes, who's the chairman of the Intelligence Committee in the House. Okay. And he said, and Devin went on the record and he said this whole thing is garbage. Trust me, Devin is going to ask for a vote in the Intelligence Committee to destroy this investigation on a partisan basis, because, of course, when you have the majority, you have the most members on the committee and you head the committee. So Nunes is the head. He's going to say, hey, let's vote it down in committee so it never goes to the full floor. There will be no investigation in the House. The Senate is not so convinced. And so that's our only hope. Our only hope is the Senate.
Well, there is a resolution that Gerald Nadler of New York has proposed, which is coming to a vote, I think, on Tuesday, to basically start an inquiry. This, I think, is with the House Intelligence Committee.
Here's what I would do.
I've asked my rep,
these stories,
Adam Schiff, to get behind it. He's out here in California.
You should. But let me tell you something. This is such a crazy story. I mean, it is the stuff of movie making, because it's dead.
It's a John le Carré novel,
It's The Godfather. Almost every business deal is. I told you, that's how I got my MBA in business, watching all the Godfathers. And, the last one nobody likes, but it's called, it's all about oil and gas. So, people should watch it, even though the acting is just piss poor. But, okay, so The crazy part about all of this, the really, really sick part about all of this, is that the Senate knows, the intelligence committees know, but the simplest way to find out what you need to know is to subpoena his tax returns.
There you go. Yeah.
And that's what I think the American people understand the best. I mean, we could, these stories are, political intrigue stories, and they're really, crazy with dead people showing up, and high-ranking Russians, ex-KGB officers, current KGB officers, ambassadors to Latin America, ambassadors to Greece, ambassadors to the UN, all ending up dead in the last couple of weeks. Not to mention the guy in Ankara who was shot on TV. But
that assassination, that was nuts.
Oh, that was nuts. That was absolutely bizarre. And
I think that was probably in revenge for Aleppo. I do believe what that gunman was.
Well, they want you to believe that that's what it was. How else would you explain it? How else could you possibly explain it? So you have some Russian operative screaming Allah Akbar, and then everybody goes, another Muslim terrorist, but...
and then he was killed conveniently, so he can't talk either.
Exactly.
Yeah, all the loose ends are tied up.
Yes, exactly. But the best thing in the world would be to subpoena this man's tax returns once and for all, and go all the way back to 2007 to the current state of his business dealings, and then people will start to know who this man is, who he owes money to, where the business deals failed, where he was trying, what happened to Trump Vodka? Do you know what I mean? Who contracted with him? Where does money come from? What is the deal with Deutsche Bank? Does he?
Congress can definitely do that as part of their investigation, and those schedules are what's going to show all the information if there is stuff to be had. It'll show all the partnership entities, the corporate entities, et cetera, the LLCs, you name it.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. All right. Well, listen, thank you so much. Have a great weekend. Thank you. Me too.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
With the news filled with one depressing story after another, and my newfound intention to look at things in a positive light, I thought we'd take a look at some of today's news stories without the anger, but instead with a laugh.
It's not the laughter of the president's boys. You better listen to the laugh.
So take smarmy little Jimmy O'Keefe.